Diana Winters had learned to read a room the way some people read books. It was a skill honed over years of client presentations, tense negotiations, and corporate boardrooms where one wrong word could cost thousands of dollars. That Saturday morning, sitting in the sunlit corner of Bellamy's, one of the city's most exclusive brunch spots, she read the room and felt something cold settle in her stomach. William Taylor, her fiancé of 8 months, sat across from her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. To his left, Derek Walsh nursed a mimosa and kept glancing at his phone. To his right, another groomsman whose name Diana could never quite remember fiddled with his napkin. The energy at the table felt rehearsed, like actors waiting for their cue. Diana smoothed the fabric of her cream-colored dress and tried to shake the unease. She had chosen this outfit carefully that morning, pairing it with delicate gold jewelry that caught the light. Her auburn hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and she had taken extra time with her makeup, wanting to look perfect for what was supposed to be a celebratory brunch with William's closest friends. In 3 months, she would walk down the aisle in a gown that currently hung in her closet, wrapped in protective plastic. In 3 months, she would become Diana Taylor. The thought had made her smile when she woke up that morning. Now, watching William's jaw tighten as he scrolled through his phone, she wasn't sure why. The restaurant buzzed with the comfortable noise of weekend luxury. Crystal glasses clinked against fine china. Laughter rippled from nearby tables, where families celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with warm pastries and the faint perfume of the orchids that decorated every table. Bellamy's was the kind of place where people came to be seen, where every meal was an event worthy of social media posts and carefully filtered photographs. Diana had always felt slightly out of place in venues like this, despite her success as a marketing consultant. She came from a middle-class family in the suburbs, where Sunday brunch meant pancakes at the kitchen table, not $60 eggs Benedict under chandeliers. William, on the other hand, moved through places like Bellamy's as if he owned them. His family had money, the kind that stretched back generations and came with expectations. He worked in corporate finance, wore custom-tailored suits, and had a smile that could convince anyone of anything. When they first met at a networking event 2 years ago, Diana had been charmed by his confidence, by the way he seemed so certain about everything. He had pursued her relentlessly, showing up at her office with flowers, planning elaborate dates, introducing her to his world of country clubs and yacht parties. She had felt chosen, special, like she had won some prize she hadn't known she was competing for. But lately, something had shifted. William had become distant, distracted. He worked late more often, his phone always face down on whatever surface it rested on. When she asked about his day, his answers came out clipped and vague. She told herself it was wedding stress, that planning a 200-person celebration would strain any relationship. Her best friend Allison, ever the practical lawyer, had warned her that cold feet were normal, that William would come around once the pressure eased. Diana had believed her because she wanted to believe her. She had invested so much into this relationship, into the idea of the life they would build together. She had already changed her work schedule to accommodate his social calendar, had learned to navigate his family's complicated dynamics, had spent countless hours planning a wedding that sometimes felt more like a performance than a celebration of love. Now, sitting across from him in Bellamy's, watching him exchange loaded glances with Derek, Diana felt that cold certainty settle deeper. Something was about to happen. She could feel it in the air, thick and electric, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. William cleared his throat and set down his phone. The gesture was deliberate, almost theatrical. Derek straightened in his chair. The other groomsmen stopped fidgeting. Diana's fingers tightened around her water glass, the condensation cool and slippery against her palm. Around them, the restaurant continued its cheerful chaos, oblivious to the tension coiling at their corner table. "Diana," William said, his voice louder than necessary. "We need to talk." Those 4 words landed like stones. Diana felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her face carefully neutral, a skill she had perfected in client meetings when presentations went sideways. She set down her water glass with deliberate care and met his eyes, those blue eyes that had once looked at her with warmth and now held something she couldn't quite name. "Of course," she said evenly. "What's on your mind?" William leaned back in his chair, and Diana noticed Derek had pulled out his phone, angling it slightly toward their table. The other groomsmen did the same. Her stomach dropped. They were recording. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, but she kept her expression placid, her hands folded in her lap where they couldn't see them trembling. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," William continued, his voice carrying across nearby tables now, drawing attention. Heads turned, conversations quieted. About us, about the wedding, about everything. Diana said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was often the best response, that people revealed more when you let them fill the void. William seemed thrown by her lack of reaction, his carefully planned speech momentarily derailed by her calm gaze. He recovered quickly. "The truth is, Diana, I can't do this anymore. I can't marry you." The words hung in the air between them. Diana felt them land, felt the weight of them settle into her chest, but her face betrayed nothing. Around them, the restaurant had gone quieter. People were definitely watching now, phones discreetly angled toward their table. Strangers hungry for drama, for a story they could share later. "I see," Diana said softly. "Can I ask why?" William's jaw tightened. This wasn't going the way he had planned. She could see the frustration flickering across his face, the annoyance that she wasn't giving him the reaction he wanted. He had expected tears, hysterics, a scene he could record and share, proof of her instability that would justify his decision to everyone who questioned it. "You're controlling," he said, his voice rising. "You're obsessive about every little detail. You make everything about you. Honestly, Diana, you're exhausting to be around. I feel like I'm suffocating." Each word was chosen to wound, designed to provoke. Diana felt them cut into her, felt the sharp sting of humiliation as dozens of strangers absorbed William's assessment of her character. But she didn't flinch. She sat perfectly still, her green eyes steady on his face, watching him perform his cruelty for an audience. "I've tried to make this work," William continued, emboldened by the attention, by the phones recording his performance. "But the truth is, you're not the woman I thought you were. You're unstable. You're irrational. Honestly, Diana, you need help. Professional help." Derek nodded along, providing silent validation. The other groomsmen tried to look sympathetic, but couldn't quite hide his excitement at being part of this spectacle. Diana looked at each of them in turn, understanding flooding through her with terrible clarity. This was planned. This was theater. They had chosen this restaurant, this public venue, specifically to humiliate her, to create a viral moment that would paint William as the reasonable one, the victim of a crazy fiancé. William stood up, and the movement drew even more attention. The entire restaurant seemed to be watching now, brunch forgotten, mimosas growing warm as strangers leaned closer to hear every word of this unfolding drama. "I will never marry this crazy woman." William's voice rang out across Bellamy's, echoing off the high ceilings, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers. His words were a proclamation, a declaration designed for maximum impact. "This wedding is cancelled. It's over. We're done." Silence crashed over the restaurant like a wave. Every eye turned to Diana, waiting for the breakdown, the tears, the screaming, the kind of emotional explosion that would validate William's words, that would give everyone the show they had been promised. Diana felt everything inside her go very still and very cold. She looked at William standing above her, his face flushed with righteous anger, his friends recording every second. the strangers watching with hungry eyes. She looked at the ring on her left hand, the 3-carat diamond that had cost more than her car, that William had presented to her on a beach at sunset 8 months ago, while a photographer he had hired captured every moment. And then Diana smiled. It wasn't a sad smile or a bitter smile. It was calm, almost serene. The smile of someone who had just understood something important. She reached down and slowly twisted the engagement ring off her finger. The diamond caught the light, throwing rainbow prisms across the white tablecloth. She set it down gently in front of William's empty plate, the soft click of metal on china loud in the silence. "Thank you," Diana said, her voice clear and steady, "for your honesty." She stood up with fluid grace, reaching for her purse. From her wallet, she pulled out a crisp $100 bill and placed it beside her untouched plate of eggs. Benedict, more than enough to cover her portion of the meal, and a generous tip for the server who would have to deal with the aftermath of this scene. William stared at her, confusion replacing his anger. This wasn't the script. This wasn't how rejected women were supposed to behave. Derek's phone wavered slightly, uncertainty flickering across his face. The other groomsmen looked almost disappointed. Diana adjusted her purse on her shoulder and looked at William one last time. "I hope you find what you're looking for," she said simply. Then she turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking steadily against the marble floor, her spine straight, her head high. The walk across Bellamy's felt endless. She could feel every eye following her, could sense the phones still recording, capturing her retreat. But she didn't hurry. She didn't run. She moved with the same confident grace she brought to boardroom presentations, the same composure she maintained during difficult client meetings. She was aware of her breathing, slow and controlled. She was aware of her hands, steady at her sides. She was aware that she was performing now too, but her performance was one of dignity, of refusing to give William the satisfaction of her pain. The hostess at the front desk watched her approach with wide eyes. Diana gave her a small nod, then pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the bright Saturday morning. The sun felt too cheerful, too warm on her skin. The street was busy with weekend shoppers and tourists, people going about their normal days, unaware that Diana's entire world had just collapsed inside a restaurant known for its overpriced mimosas. She walked to her car, parked 2 blocks away in a garage. Her legs carried her automatically, muscle memory taking over while her mind struggled to process what had just happened. She found her silver sedan on the 3rd level, unlocked it with shaking hands that she hadn't allowed anyone to see shake, and slid into the driver's seat. For a long moment, Diana sat there in the dim concrete garage, her hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the cement wall in front of her. She could still feel the weight of dozens of stares, could still hear William's voice declaring her crazy to a room full of strangers. She looked down at her left hand, at the pale stripe of skin where her engagement ring had lived for 8 months, and something inside her finally cracked. The sob that tore from her throat surprised her with its violence. It was raw and ugly, nothing like the controlled woman who had walked out of Bellamy's with her head high. Diana pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and let it come. Let the tears fall hot and fast. Let her body shake with the force of grief and humiliation and rage. She cried for the future she had planned, for the white dress hanging in her closet, for the deposits they had made on venues and caterers and florists. She cried for the version of herself who had woken up that morning excited for brunch, who had carefully chosen her outfit and styled her hair, who had still believed she was loved. The garage was empty and cold, her sobs echoing off concrete walls. No one was watching now. No one was recording. Here, in the privacy of her car, Diana Winters allowed herself to fall completely apart. The crying stopped eventually, the way all storms do. Diana sat in her car for what might have been minutes or hours. She couldn't tell. Her face felt swollen and hot, her makeup ruined. Mascara probably streaked down her cheeks in dark rivers. She pulled down the visor mirror and winced at her reflection. Her green eyes were bloodshot and puffy. Her carefully applied eyeliner smudged into raccoon circles. She looked exactly like the unstable woman William had described to a restaurant full of strangers. The thought sparked something in her, something small and sharp beneath the grief. She reached into her purse for the pack of makeup wipes she always carried and began cleaning her face with mechanical efficiency. Each swipe removed another layer of the morning's careful preparation, revealing the pale, exhausted woman underneath. When she finished, she looked at herself again in the small mirror. Without the makeup, without the styled hair that was now disheveled from her breakdown, she looked younger, more vulnerable, but also somehow more real. Diana started the car and drove home on autopilot, navigating familiar streets, while her mind replayed the scene at Bellamy's in excruciating detail. William's face as he stood up, Derek's phone angled toward her, the hungry eyes of strangers, the diamond ring sitting on the white tablecloth, her own voice, steady and calm, thanking him. She had been so controlled, so dignified, and now, alone in her car, she felt like she was dying. Her apartment was in a newer building downtown, the kind of place she had stretched her budget to afford because William's friends all lived in similar buildings, and she had wanted to fit into his world. She parked in her assigned spot and took the elevator to the 7th floor, grateful she didn't encounter any neighbors who might ask why she looked like she had been crying for hours. She let herself into her apartment and stood in the entryway, looking at the space that had been decorated with such care, such hope for the future. Wedding magazines covered her coffee table. Fabric swatches for bridesmaid dresses were pinned to a corkboard in her home office. The guest list, meticulously updated and color-coded, sat open on her laptop. Everywhere she looked, she saw evidence of the life she had been building, the future that had just been demolished in a public restaurant while strangers recorded it for entertainment. Diana walked to her bedroom and saw the wedding dress hanging on the back of her closet door, a ghost in white silk and lace. She had found it 3 months ago at a boutique Allison had recommended, had cried happy tears when she first tried it on, had felt like a princess in some fairy tale. Now, it looked like a costume for a play that had been canceled, a reminder of her own foolishness. She pulled off her cream dress and left it in a heap on the floor, something she never did, then climbed into bed still wearing her underwear. The sheets were cool and soft, and she pulled them over her head like a child hiding from monsters. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to rewind time. She wanted to wake up and discover this had all been a terrible nightmare. But it wasn't a nightmare. It was real. William had ended their engagement in the most public, humiliating way possible, and she had no idea why. That last thought kept circling back, insistent and sharp. Why had he done it like that? If he wanted to end things, he could have told her privately. They could have had a conversation like adults, could have dissolved their relationship with some dignity intact. Instead, he had chosen spectacle. He had chosen cruelty. He had brought his friends to record it, had picked a crowded restaurant where the maximum number of people would witness her humiliation. Diana sat up in bed, pushing the covers back. Her logical mind, the part of her that analyzed marketing strategies and client behavior for a living, was starting to cut through the emotional fog. William's performance had been too rehearsed, too theatrical. The timing, the location, the recording phones, all of it pointed to planning. This wasn't a spontaneous decision made in the heat of the moment. This was calculated. But why? What did he gain from humiliating her so publicly? She got out of bed and walked to her home office, a small second bedroom she had converted into a workspace. Her laptop sat on the desk, still open to the wedding guest list. Diana stared at the screen, her marketing consultant brain beginning to work through the problem methodically. When clients behaved unexpectedly, she always looked for the underlying motivation. What was William's motivation? Her phone buzzed from somewhere in the apartment. She had left it in her purse by the front door. Diana retrieved it and saw a flood of notifications. Text messages from numbers she didn't recognize. Voicemails, social media alerts. Her stomach sank. The videos were already online. With shaking hands, she opened her social media app and searched for Bellamy's restaurant. There it was, posted less than 2 hours ago. A video titled, "Groom Cancels Wedding in Restaurant, Crazy Bride's Reaction." It already had thousands of views. Diana forced herself to click play. The video showed William standing up, his voice clear and loud. "I will never marry this crazy woman. This wedding is cancelled. It's over. We're done." Then the camera focused on her face, waiting for the breakdown. Instead, it captured her calm expression, her steady hands as she removed the ring, her quiet, "Thank you." The video ended with her walking away, head high, leaving William standing there looking confused. The comments section was a battlefield. Some people praised her composure. Others called her cold and emotionless, suggesting William was right to leave someone so unfeeling. A few wondered what the full story was, questioned why he would do it so publicly. But most people were just entertained, treating her life like it was a reality show created for their amusement. Diana closed the app and set her phone face down on her desk. She felt sick. Thousands of strangers had now witnessed the worst moment of her life, had judged her based on a 90-second video that showed none of the context, none of the relationship that had led to that moment. She was trending, becoming a cautionary tale or an inspiration or a joke, depending on who was commenting. She sat down at her desk and forced herself to think clearly. The humiliation was unbearable. Yes, the public nature of the breakup was cruel, absolutely. But underneath all of that, something felt wrong. William had been distant lately, but not angry. He hadn't accused her of being controlling or obsessive before today. In fact, she had been the one making most of the wedding decisions because he claimed to be too busy with work. She had been the one calling vendors, reviewing contracts, managing the budget. If anything, she had wished he was more involved, more invested in the planning process. So why had he suddenly painted her as controlling? Why had he called her unstable when she had never given him reason to think that? Unless he needed her to be those things. Unless he needed the narrative to be that he was escaping a problematic relationship rather than simply choosing to leave. Diana pulled up their shared cloud storage account on her laptop. They had created it 6 months ago to organize wedding documents, to store contracts and vendor information, and the thousands of decisions that went into planning a large celebration. William had full access to everything. She had full access to everything. She logged in and navigated to the main folder. Venue contracts, catering proposals, photographer agreements, floral designs, all the expensive, carefully chosen elements of a wedding that was now never going to happen. Diana felt a fresh wave of grief looking at those files, at all the hours she had spent reviewing options and negotiating prices. Then she noticed something. William had recently added a new folder just 3 days ago. It was labeled Notes, innocuous and easily overlooked. Diana's cursor hovered over it. Part of her didn't want to open it, didn't want to know what was inside. But the other part, the part that had built a successful consulting career by asking difficult questions and following evidence wherever it led, needed to understand. She clicked the folder open. Inside was a single document titled Saturday Plan. Diana's heart began to race as she opened it. What she saw made her stomach turn. It was a script, a detailed point-by-point breakdown of exactly how to end their engagement publicly. The document was dated 2 weeks ago, which meant William had been planning this for at least that long, maybe longer. Step 1, it read. Choose a high-profile location on a weekend. Maximum witnesses. Bellamy's on Saturday morning. Brunch crowd is perfect. Lots of phones out already for photos. Diana felt cold reading his words. seeing the calculation behind what had felt like spontaneous cruelty. Step 2. Bring Derek and Mike for support and documentation. Make sure phones are recording before starting. Need multiple angles for social media. Mike. That was the other groomsman's name. She hadn't been able to remember it at the restaurant because she had only met him twice, both times briefly. Now she knew why he was there. He was a camera operator in William's planned humiliation. Step 3. Use specific language: controlling, obsessive, unstable. These words matter for the narrative. Need to establish that she's the problem, not me. Diana's hands were shaking now, but she kept reading. Step 4. Make it loud. Make it public. Want everyone watching. The more witnesses, the more the story spreads. Go viral if possible. Her breath came faster. This wasn't just a breakup. This was a calculated attack on her reputation, her character. William had weaponized their relationship ending, had turned it into a public spectacle designed to paint him as the victim and her as the villain. But why? The question pounded in her head. Why go to such lengths? She kept reading. Step 5. If she cries or makes a scene, perfect. That's the video we need. If she stays calm, spin it as her being cold and emotionless. Either way, we win. We. Diana's eyes caught on that word. We win. Who was we? She scrolled down and found the answer in a message thread that had been copied into the document. The messages were between William and someone named Lori. Diana didn't recognize the name at first, then remembered. Lori Galloway. She worked at William's company, in the same finance department. Diana had met her once at a corporate event, had shaken her hand and exchanged pleasantries. Lori was 30 years old, blonde, with the kind of effortless beauty that came from good genes and expensive skincare. She had seemed nice enough in their brief interaction. Now, reading the messages between Lori and William, Diana understood with sickening clarity what had been happening behind her back. The messages went back 4 months. 4 months of flirtation, of planning, of William and Lori discussing their future together while he was still engaged to Diana, while Diana was planning a wedding and choosing flowers and addressing invitations to 200 guests. Can't wait until this is over, Lori had written 3 weeks ago. I hate sneaking around. Soon, William had responded. Just need to handle Diana first. Can't just break up normally. She'll make it difficult. Need to control the narrative. Diana felt like she couldn't breathe. She forced herself to keep reading, to see all of it, to understand the full scope of the betrayal. What if she fights for you? Lori had asked. She won't, William had replied. Not after Saturday. Once everyone sees how she really is, she'll be too embarrassed to fight back. Nobody will believe her side anyway. There was more. Messages discussing how they would move in together after the wedding was canceled. Messages about trips they wanted to take. Messages about Lori wearing the engagement ring that currently sat on a white tablecloth at Bellamy's. Messages that made it clear this wasn't a recent affair, wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a full relationship that had been blooming in the shadows, while Diana planned a future that William had already decided to destroy. Diana sat back in her chair, staring at the screen. The grief she had felt in the car was transforming into something else now, something sharper and more focused. William hadn't just left her. He had plotted to humiliate her. He had crafted a narrative designed to isolate her, to make sure that when he moved on publicly with Lori, as he clearly planned to do, everyone would understand why. Poor William, forced to escape a crazy, controlling fiancé. Poor William, finally free to be happy with someone stable and rational like Lori. The cruelty of it took her breath away. But underneath the pain, Diana felt something else stirring. Anger. Cold, clear, calculating anger. She looked at the folders on the screen, at all the wedding documents she had so carefully organized. The venue contract alone was $30,000, non-refundable as of last month when they had passed the cancellation deadline. The caterer was another $25,000, also non-refundable. The photographer, the florist, the band, the cake, all of it represented deposits and payments that couldn't be recovered. Diana had paid for half of everything from her savings. William had paid for the other half. $55,000 of her money was gone, spent on a wedding that would never happen. William would lose the same amount, and he clearly didn't care. To him, it was worth the cost to move on to Lori without any inconvenient complications from a jilted fiancé. But what if she didn't have to lose that money? What if there was a way to salvage something from this disaster? Diana opened a new tab and pulled up the venue contract. The wedding was scheduled for 3 months from now, on a Saturday evening in September. The historic Hartwell Estate, a beautiful property with gardens and a ballroom, perfect for the elegant celebration she had envisioned. The contract was clear. All payments were non-refundable, but the date was reserved regardless of whether the wedding happened or not. An idea began to form, small and sharp, in the back of her mind. She opened the catering contract next. Same terms, non-refundable, but the service was paid for and scheduled. The food would be prepared whether there was a wedding or not. The photographer, the florist, the band. Every single vendor had been paid deposits or full amounts that couldn't be recovered. The celebration was essentially prepaid, whether Diana walked down an aisle or not. What if she didn't cancel it? What if she transformed it? Diana's marketing brain began working through the logistics. She could send cancellation notices to the guests, explain that the wedding wasn't happening, but she could also extend an invitation to a different kind of celebration. A freedom party, maybe. A celebration of new beginnings, of independence, of refusing to let someone else's cruelty define her story. It was unconventional, maybe even crazy by some standards. But the more Diana thought about it, the more it made sense. William expected her to slink away in embarrassment, to hide from the humiliation he had engineered. He expected her to eat the financial loss and the emotional devastation quietly, to make room for him to move on with Lori without complications. What if she refused to do what he expected? What if she took back the narrative he had tried so hard to control? Diana looked at the messages between William and Lori, still open on her screen. "She'll be too embarrassed to fight back," he had written. "Nobody will believe her side anyway." A cold smile touched her lips. William had underestimated her. He had seen her as someone to be managed, controlled, dismissed. He had weaponized their relationship ending, had turned her into a viral moment for his own purposes. But he had made one crucial mistake. He had left all the evidence sitting in their shared cloud storage, accessible to her, documented and time-stamped. Diana began taking screenshots methodically, capturing every message between William and Lori, every line of his cruel script, every piece of evidence that showed his calculated betrayal. She saved them to a separate folder on her desktop, backed them up to her own private cloud account. She wasn't sure yet what she would do with this information, but she knew having it gave her power that William didn't realize she possessed. When she finished, Diana closed her laptop and sat in silence. The apartment felt different now, less like a tomb for her dead dreams and more like a war room. Her phone continued to buzz with notifications from the viral video, from strangers offering opinions on her life. She ignored them all. Instead, she opened her contacts and scrolled to Allison's name. Her best friend answered on the first ring. "Diana, oh my God, I just saw the video. Are you okay? Where are you? I'm coming over right now." Diana's voice was steady when she answered, surprising herself. "I'm home. And Allison, I need your legal expertise. How binding are wedding vendor contracts once deposits are paid?" There was a pause on the other end. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," Diana said slowly, looking at the wedding dress hanging in her bedroom, at the magazines covering her coffee table, at all the evidence of the future she had planned, that William made a mistake. He thought he could humiliate me and walk away clean. But he forgot something important. "What's that?" "I'm really good at marketing." And I just found out exactly what kind of man he is. The question is, what do I do with that information?" Allison was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed, a sharp sound of surprised approval. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. And Diana? Whatever you're planning, I'm in." Diana ended the call and stood up, walking to the window of her apartment. The city stretched out below her, indifferent to her pain, continuing its Saturday afternoon rhythm. Somewhere out there, William was probably celebrating with Lori, confident that he had handled things perfectly, that Diana would fade quietly into his past while he moved forward into his future. He had no idea what was coming, and that, Diana realized, gave her an advantage he had never anticipated. She had been humiliated publicly, yes. She had been betrayed and lied to and turned into entertainment for strangers. But she was still standing. And she was done being the victim in William Taylor's carefully crafted story. It was time to write her own ending. Allison Hendricks arrived 18 minutes later, carrying 2 bottles of wine and a determination that radiated from her like heat. She was a family law attorney with a reputation for being ruthless in court and fiercely loyal to her friends. When Diana opened the door, Allison took one look at her face and pulled her into a tight hug that nearly broke Diana's carefully constructed composure all over again. "I'm going to destroy him," Allison said into Diana's hair. "I'm going to find every legal avenue available, and I'm going to make him regret the day he was born." Diana laughed, a watery sound that was half sob, and pulled back. "I have something to show you first. Then you can decide how we destroy him." They settled on Diana's couch, and Diana pulled up the screenshots on her laptop. Allison read through them in silence, her expression growing darker with each message, each line of William's script. When she finished, she sat back and let out a long breath. "This is worse than I thought," Allison said quietly. "This wasn't just him being a coward about breaking up. This was premeditated character assassination. He wanted to make sure you couldn't fight back, couldn't defend yourself, because everyone would already believe his version of events." "I know," Diana said. Her voice was steadier now, the grief settling into something more manageable, more useful. "And the worst part is, it almost worked. If I hadn't looked in the cloud storage, I would have just believed I was the problem, that maybe I had been controlling without realizing it, that maybe I was unstable and didn't see it." Allison reached over and gripped Diana's hand. "You're not any of those things. You're organized and thoughtful, and you care about details because you're good at your job and good at life. William is a manipulative narcissist who needed you to be the villain so he could justify his affair without looking like the bad guy." Diana nodded, squeezing Allison's hand back. "I want to do something about it. I'm not going to just disappear and let him win, but I need to be smart. I can't just post these screenshots online and start a social media war. That makes me look bitter and vengeful, which plays right into his narrative." "Agreed," Allison said, her lawyer brain clearly working through options. "We need to be strategic. What were you thinking with the vendor contracts question?" Diana explained her idea about transforming the wedding into a different kind of celebration. As she spoke, she could see Allison's expression shift from skepticism to understanding to something like admiration. "That's brilliant," Allison said when Diana finished. "It takes away his power completely. He humiliated you by canceling the wedding publicly, but you turn around and celebrate anyway. It sends a message that you're not destroyed, that you're actually better off without him. And it uses money that's already spent, so you're not wasting it out of spite. You're being practical." "Exactly," Diana said. "But I need to know legally if I can do that. The venue, the catering, everything is in both our names. Can he stop me from using the reservations?" Allison pulled out her phone and started making notes. "Let me look at the contracts. Generally, if payments are non-refundable and the services are scheduled, whoever shows up to claim them gets them. He'd have to file an injunction to stop you, which means going to court, which means explaining to a judge why he's trying to prevent his ex-fiancé from using services that are already paid for. That's not a good look, especially if you have evidence of his affair and his premeditated plan to humiliate you. Diana felt something like hope stir in her chest. So I could actually do this? I think so. Let me review everything tomorrow when I'm in my office and have access to my legal databases. But Diana, you need to think carefully about this. Transforming your wedding into a party is bold, but it's also going to draw more attention. The videos from today are already viral. If you do this, you're staying in the spotlight instead of letting the story die down. Are you prepared for that? Diana thought about the comments she had read under the video, the strangers who had judged her based on 90 seconds of footage. She thought about William and Lori planning their future together while she grieved the loss of hers. She thought about the script he had written, the way he had engineered her humiliation down to the last detail. Yes, she said firmly, I'm prepared. Because right now, the story is his. He controlled the narrative from the beginning. I want to take it back. I want people to know the truth, but I want to do it in a way that shows I'm not bitter or broken. I want to do it by living well. Allison smiled, the fierce expression of a woman who had won many courtroom battles. Then let's plan a party. They spent the rest of the afternoon going through contracts and making lists. The wedding had been scheduled for the 21st of September, which was now 12 weeks away. The guest list was 200 people, but Diana knew most of those guests were William's family and friends, people she had met only in the context of being his fiancé. Her own list was smaller, maybe 40 people. Her parents, her sister, her colleagues, her friends from college. We'll send out cancellation notices to everyone on the original guest list, Allison said, typing notes on her laptop. Formal, polite, explaining that the wedding has been called off. Then we send a second invitation to your people only, making it clear this is now a celebration of new beginnings. We keep it classy, nothing that sounds bitter or revenge-focused. Diana nodded. A freedom party. That's what I want to call it. Not a wedding, not an anti-wedding. Just a celebration of moving forward. I love it, Allison said. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to have this incredible party at a beautiful venue, with amazing food and music and flowers. You're going to invite the people who actually love and support you. And you're going to look absolutely stunning in something fabulous that isn't a wedding dress. You're going to dance and laugh and show everyone that you're not just surviving, you're thriving. The image Allison painted was intoxicating. Diana could see it, could almost feel the possibility of it. A night where she reclaimed her joy, where she celebrated herself instead of mourning what she had lost. It felt radical and terrifying, and exactly right. What about the evidence? Diana asked. The screenshots of his messages and the script. When do I use those? Allison's expression turned calculating. We hold on to them. We don't play that card unless we need to. Right now, you have the moral high ground because you walked away with dignity. If William tries to interfere with the party, if he starts spreading lies about you, then we respond with facts. We show people exactly what he did and why, but we don't lead with it. We let him think you're just moving on quietly. He'll hear about the party, though, Diana said. Once I send out invitations, word will get back to him. Good, Allison said with a sharp smile. Let him hear about it. Let him wonder what you're planning. The uncertainty will eat at him, especially if he thinks you might reveal what you know about him and Lori. Diana felt a dark satisfaction at that thought. William had spent 2 weeks planning her humiliation. Now she had 12 weeks to plan something he wouldn't see coming. Over the next few days, Diana threw herself into transforming the wedding plans with the same meticulous attention to detail she brought to her client projects. She drafted cancellation notices that were gracious and brief, explaining that the wedding would not be taking place, but thanking guests for their support. She didn't blame anyone or explain what had happened. She kept it simple and dignified. Then she designed new invitations for her freedom party. They were elegant, but different from the wedding invitations, printed on deep purple cardstock instead of cream. The wording was carefully chosen to be celebratory without being bitter. You are invited to celebrate new beginnings with Diana Winters. Join us for an evening of joy, friendship, and freedom as we toast to the future. September 21st, at the historic Hartwell estate. She sent them to her parents first. Her mother called within minutes of receiving the email preview. "Diana, sweetheart, are you sure about this?" Her mother's voice was worried, but trying to be supportive. "I support whatever you decide, but this is very public. People are going to talk." "Let them talk, Mom," Diana said, surprised by how calm she sounded. "They're already talking. At least this way, I'm giving them something positive to talk about." Her father got on the line. "Your mother and I saw the video from the restaurant. That boy is a fool, Diana. You held yourself with such grace. We're proud of you." Diana felt tears prick her eyes at her father's words. "Thank you, Dad. That means everything." "And we'll be at this party," he continued. "We'll celebrate with you." "You're going to be just fine, sweetheart. Better than fine." The invitations went out over the next week. The responses were overwhelmingly supportive. Friends from college messaged her privately to say they had always thought William was too controlling, too concerned with appearances. Colleagues told her they admired her strength. Even a few of William's friends, people she had met through him, reached out to say they were disgusted by what he had done at the restaurant and wanted her to know they were on her side. Allison came back with good news about the vendor contracts. "You're legally clear to use all the services. Everything is paid for and scheduled. William would have to prove financial harm or breach of contract to stop you, and he can't do either. The services are being used as intended, just for a different purpose. You're golden." Diana felt a weight lift off her shoulders. This was really happening. She was really going to do this. The transformation required some adjustments to the original plans. The ceremony space wouldn't be needed, so Diana repurposed it into a cocktail area where guests could mingle before dinner. The sweetheart table for the bride and groom became a regular table where she would sit with Allison and her sister. The wedding cake, which had already been designed and partially paid for, was redesigned into an elegant tiered dessert that celebrated autumn flavors instead of traditional wedding vanilla. The flowers changed, too. Instead of white roses and lilies, Diana chose deep burgundies and burnt oranges, colors that felt bold and rich and nothing like the soft romantic palette she had originally planned. The florist, a kind woman named Margaret who had heard about the breakup, gave Diana a significant discount on the redesign. "You're doing something brave," Margaret said, when Diana came in to finalize the new arrangements. "I've been in this business for 30 years, and I've never seen anyone handle a canceled wedding like this. You're turning heartbreak into something beautiful." Diana left the flower shop feeling lighter than she had in weeks. She was building something new from the wreckage William had created, something that belonged only to her. But, as the weeks passed, Diana noticed something. William had gone quiet. There were no messages, no calls, no attempts to retrieve belongings he had left at her apartment. The social media posts about the restaurant scene had died down, replaced by newer scandals and viral moments. It was as if he had simply erased her from his life and moved on. Diana should have been relieved. Instead, she felt uneasy. William wasn't the type to let things go so easily. He was too proud, too concerned with controlling narratives. His silence felt deliberate, like he was waiting for something. She got her answer 6 weeks after the restaurant scene. Allison called her on a Tuesday evening, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Diana, I need you to look at William's social media right now." Diana's stomach dropped. She pulled up his profile and saw what Allison was talking about. William had posted a photo 20 minutes ago. He was at a restaurant, somewhere elegant and expensive, and sitting across from him, smiling into the camera, was Lori Galloway. The caption read, "Sometimes life surprises you with exactly what you need when you need it most. Grateful for new beginnings and real love." The comments were already flooding in. friends congratulating him, strangers saying he looked happy, a few people making pointed comments about how fast he had moved on, but most of the responses were positive. He was spinning his narrative in real time, positioning himself as someone who had escaped a bad relationship and found true happiness. And he had tagged the location, the same restaurant, Bellamy's, where he had ended their engagement. The symbolism was deliberate. He was claiming that space, that moment, rewriting the memory to be about his liberation rather than her humiliation. Diana stared at the photo, at Laurie's beautiful smile, at William's satisfied expression. She felt anger rise in her throat, hot and bitter. He was flaunting his affair, the relationship that had been growing in secret while Diana planned their wedding. And he was doing it in a way that made him look like the good guy, the man who had found real love after escaping instability. "Diana?" Allison's voice came through the phone. "Talk to me." "What are you thinking?" Diana took a slow breath, forcing herself to think clearly instead of reacting emotionally. "I'm thinking he's trying to control the narrative again. He's been quiet for weeks because he was waiting for the right moment to go public with Laurie. He wanted enough time to pass that it wouldn't look like he cheated, but not so much time that people forgot about the restaurant scene. This is calculated." "It absolutely is," Allison agreed. "And it's working. Look at the comments. Most people are buying it." Diana scrolled through the responses. Allison was right. The story William was telling was taking hold. He was the hero who had escaped a difficult situation and found happiness. She was becoming a footnote, the crazy ex-fiancé he had wisely left behind. "When is your party?" Allison asked. 5 weeks from Saturday." "Then we wait," Allison said firmly. "We don't respond to this. We don't post anything bitter or defensive. We let him think he's won. And then we show up at that party, and we make it so incredible, so joyful, so obviously a celebration of you thriving without him, that his little Instagram post looks pathetic in comparison." Diana nodded, even though Allison couldn't see her. "You're right. I'm not going to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. He wants me to be upset, wants me to lash out so he can point to it as more evidence that I'm unstable. I won't do it." "That's my girl," Allison said. 5 more weeks, Diana. Then we show him exactly what he lost." After they hung up, Diana sat with her phone in her hand, staring at the photo of William and Laurie. She thought about the messages she had read, the ones where they had planned this whole thing together. She thought about the script William had written, the care he had taken to humiliate her publicly. She thought about the engagement ring she had placed so carefully on the table at Bellamy's, about walking out with her head high while strangers recorded her retreat. William thought he had won. He thought he had successfully rewritten their story so that he emerged unscathed while she faded into irrelevance. But he had made a mistake. He had underestimated her resilience, her intelligence, her refusal to be defined by his cruelty. Diana opened her laptop and pulled up the party planning documents. 5 weeks. She had 5 weeks to create something so undeniably triumphant that William's Instagram moment would be forgotten, rendered meaningless by the evidence of her joy. She got to work. The weeks that followed William's public debut with Laurie were a study in contrasts. On the surface, Diana maintained her composure, continuing to work with clients, responding professionally to the few people who asked about the breakup, and planning her freedom party with meticulous care. But privately, in the quiet moments of her apartment, she wrestled with waves of hurt that threatened to pull her under. There were nights when she would wake at 3 in the morning and reach for her phone, scrolling through William's social media against her better judgment. He and Laurie had become a public couple, posting photos from weekend trips and dinner dates, their happiness on display for everyone to see. Each post felt like a fresh wound, a reminder that while Diana was still processing the betrayal, William had moved on as if their 2 years together had meant nothing. Allison became her lifeline during those weeks, showing up unannounced with takeout food and refusing to let Diana spiral into isolation. He wants you to disappear, Allison reminded her during one particularly difficult evening. He wants you to be so embarrassed and hurt that you hide. Every day you show up to work, every time you smile at a friend, every detail you plan for this party. You're proving him wrong. Diana clung to those words. She threw herself into work, taking on new clients and delivering presentations that earned her praise from her boss. She went to lunch with old college friends who reminded her of who she had been before William, before she had started molding herself to fit into his world. She bought a new dress for the party, a deep emerald green that complemented her auburn hair and made her feel powerful in a way the white wedding dress never had. But the dress shopping trip brought its own complications. Diana had gone alone, wanting the freedom to choose something without anyone's input. She was in the fitting room of an upscale boutique, zipping up the emerald dress, when she heard familiar voices from the main showroom. Her blood ran cold. "I think the ivory one would be stunning on you," a sales associate was saying. "Would you like to try it on?" "I'd love to." The voice was unmistakably Laurie's. "We're not in a rush to get married or anything, but I like to be prepared. You know how it is." Diana stood frozen in the fitting room, the emerald dress suddenly feeling too tight, too hot. Laurie was shopping for wedding dresses. She and William were already planning their future together, while Diana was still reeling from the destruction of hers. The sales associate laughed. "How long have you and your fiancé been together?" "Well, officially only about 2 months," Laurie said, her voice carrying clearly through the boutique. "But we've been close for much longer. Sometimes you just know when you've found the right person, you know? My boyfriend William just got out of a really difficult relationship. His ex was very controlling, very unstable. He tried so hard to make it work, but eventually he realized he deserved to be happy. And here we are." Diana's hands clenched into fists. The lies were so smooth, so practiced. Laurie was repeating William's narrative word for word, painting herself as the savior who had rescued him from a troubled relationship. She had no idea that Diana was standing 15 feet away, hidden by a fitting room door, hearing every word. "That must have been hard for him," the sales associate said sympathetically. "But he's lucky to have found you." "I think we're both lucky," Laurie replied. "Oh, I love this ivory one. Let me go try it on." Diana waited until she heard the fitting room door next to hers close before she moved. She stepped out quietly, catching a glimpse of herself in the three-way mirror. The emerald dress looked stunning, but her face was pale and her eyes were too bright. She looked like a woman barely holding herself together. The sales associate, who had been helping Diana, approached carefully. "Are you all right, miss? You look like you've seen a ghost." Diana forced a smile. "I'm fine. I'll take this dress. Can you ring it up quickly, please?" She was out of the boutique before Laurie emerged from the fitting room, the emerald dress carefully wrapped in tissue paper and tucked into a garment bag. Diana sat in her car for 10 minutes, hands shaking, before she could drive home. The encounter had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Hearing Laurie casually repeat William's lies, hearing her plan a wedding while completely unaware of the calculated betrayal that had made her relationship possible, it was almost too much to bear. But it also crystallized something for Diana. She couldn't control what William and Laurie told people. She couldn't force them to acknowledge the truth, but she could live her life in a way that made their lies irrelevant. She could show up at her freedom party in that emerald dress and prove that she wasn't broken, wasn't hiding, wasn't the unstable woman they had painted her to be. The party was now 3 weeks away. The RSVPs were all in. 42 people would be attending, including Diana's parents, her younger sister Rebecca, Allison, and a mix of friends and colleagues who had reached out with support after the breakup. The venue was confirmed, the catering finalized, the flowers ordered. The band Diana had hired, a jazz quartet that specialized in upbeat standards, had the playlist ready. Everything was falling into place. Then, 2 weeks before the party, Diana's phone rang with an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Diana Winters? The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. Yes, this is Diana. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm calling from the historic Hartwell estate. I'm afraid I have some concerning news about your event scheduled for September 21st. Diana's stomach dropped. What kind of concerning news? We received a call this morning from a William Taylor. He claims that the event scheduled for that date was supposed to be a wedding, that the wedding has been canceled, and that you don't have authorization to use the venue for a different purpose. He's threatening legal action if we proceed with hosting your party. Diana sat down heavily on her couch. Of course, William had done this. She should have anticipated it. He had been too quiet, too accepting of her plans. He had been waiting for the right moment to sabotage her. Mr. Chen, Diana said, forcing her voice to remain calm and professional. William Taylor is my ex-fiancé. He's the one who ended our engagement. The venue is paid for in full. The contract is valid, and I'm well within my rights to use the space for this celebration. He has no legal standing to stop me. There was a pause on the other end. That may be true, Miss Winters, but if there's going to be a legal dispute, the venue would prefer not to be in the middle of it. We have a reputation to maintain. Perhaps it would be best if you postponed until this is resolved. Diana felt panic rising in her throat. This was exactly what William wanted. He couldn't bear the thought of her celebrating, of her moving forward publicly while he was trying to control the narrative with Laurie. So he was trying to take away the one thing she had been building toward, the one event that represented her refusal to be defeated by his cruelty. Please don't cancel, Diana said, hating how desperate she sounded. I have 42 guests who have confirmed attendance. I have vendors who have been paid. I have done nothing wrong. William is harassing me because he doesn't want me to move on. Don't let him win by giving in to his threats. Marcus Chen sighed. I understand your position, Miss Winters. Let me speak with our legal team and get back to you within 48 hours. But I have to be honest. If Mr. Taylor follows through with his threat to file an injunction, we may have no choice but to cancel the event. The call ended, and Diana immediately dialed Allison, who picked up on the first ring. He's trying to stop the party, Diana said without preamble. William called the venue and threatened legal action. They're considering canceling. That bastard, Allison said, her voice cold with fury. Okay, listen to me. Forward me the venue contract right now. I'm going to draft a letter to both William and the venue outlining exactly why this is harassment and why he has no legal grounds to stop you. Then I'm going to call William directly and remind him that if he continues this behavior, you have documentation of his affair and his premeditated plan to humiliate you that you'd be happy to share with his employer and everyone he knows. I don't want to stoop to his level, Diana said. But even as she said it, she knew she was running out of options. This isn't stooping to his level, Allison said firmly. This is self-defense. He publicly humiliated you, started a relationship with his mistress before your relationship even ended, and is now trying to prevent you from having a celebration with your friends and family. You have every right to protect yourself. Sometimes you have to show people you have teeth to get them to back down. Diana knew Allison was right. She forwarded the venue contract and spent the next hour pacing her apartment, waiting for news. When Allison called back, there was satisfaction in her voice. I just got off the phone with William, Allison said. I explained very clearly that you have legal right to use the venue, that his interference constitutes harassment, and that if he pursues this any further, we would be forced to share certain documentation about his behavior with interested parties. He was very quiet by the end of the conversation. What did he say? Diana asked. He said he'd think about it, Allison replied, which is code for, I didn't realize she had evidence, and now I'm scared. I also sent a formal letter to the venue with copies of the contract and legal precedent. I made it very clear that if they cancel your event due to baseless threats, They'll be facing a lawsuit of their own. Thank you, Diana said, feeling some of the panic ease. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd figure it out because you're brilliant and strong, Allison said. But I'm glad you don't have to figure it out alone. Now try to get some rest. William isn't going to bother you again. He knows you have ammunition now. The next morning, Marcus Chen called back. Miss Winters, we've reviewed the situation with our legal team. Your event will proceed as scheduled. We apologize for any distress this may have caused. Mr. Taylor has been informed that he is not to contact our venue again regarding this matter. Diana felt relief wash over her, like a wave. Thank you, Mr. Chen. I appreciate your professionalism in handling this. After the call ended, Diana allowed herself a moment to simply breathe. William had tried to sabotage her, and he had failed. He had pushed too far, and it had backfired. Now he knew she had evidence of his betrayal, which meant he would have to be more careful going forward. The balance of power had shifted, even if just slightly. The final 2 weeks before the party passed, in a blur of last-minute details and nervous energy. Diana confirmed arrangements with every vendor, picked up her emerald dress from Final Alterations, and practiced the short speech she planned to give, thanking everyone for their support. She didn't sleep well most nights, her mind racing with possibilities of what could go wrong, but she showed up every day and kept moving forward. 3 days before the party, Diana's sister Rebecca flew in from Chicago. She was 2 years younger than Diana, a high school teacher with a practical nature and unwavering loyalty to family. When she walked into Diana's apartment and saw the stress evident on her sister's face, she immediately pulled Diana into a hug. You're going to get through this, Rebecca said firmly, and that party is going to be amazing. I've seen the photos of the venue. I've looked at the menu. I've heard about the band. You've created something beautiful out of something terrible. That takes real strength, Di. What if nobody comes? Diana whispered, voicing the fear that had been keeping her awake at night. What if people decide at the last minute that it's too weird, too awkward, too much drama? Then you'll have a really nice dinner with me and Allison and Mom and Dad, Rebecca said with a smile. But that's not going to happen. People love you, Diana. They're going to show up. The night before the party, Diana barely slept. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The restaurant scene at Bellamy's felt like it had happened years ago instead of 12 weeks. She had been a different person then, someone who still believed in the future she and William had planned, someone who hadn't yet learned what betrayal felt like. But she had survived it. She had discovered his affair, his calculated cruelty, his willingness to destroy her reputation to protect his own. And instead of letting it break her, she had transformed it. Tomorrow night, she would stand in a beautiful venue surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her. And she would celebrate not the ending of a relationship, but the beginning of a new chapter written entirely on her own terms. Diana got out of bed at sunrise on Saturday, September 21st, the day she was supposed to have become Diana Taylor. Instead, she would remain Diana Winters, and for the first time since the breakup, that felt exactly right. She made coffee and stood at her apartment window watching the city wake up. Somewhere out there, William was probably still asleep beside Lori, secure in his new relationship, confident in the narrative he had constructed. He had no idea what tonight would bring. He had no idea that Diana had stopped being his victim the moment she had discovered his betrayal and chosen to fight back. Her phone buzzed with a text from Allison. "Today is your day. Are you ready?" Diana typed back without hesitation. "I'm ready." And she was. The historic Hartwell estate looked like something from a dream. Diana arrived 3 hours early to oversee final preparations, and even in the afternoon light, the property took her breath away. The main house was a restored 19th-century mansion with white columns and sprawling gardens that had been manicured to perfection. The ballroom where the reception would be held featured floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a pond surrounded by willow trees Everything was bathed in the golden glow of early September, the air carrying just a hint of autumn coolness that promised the changing of seasons. Margaret, the florist, was already there, setting up the arrangements. The deep burgundies and burnt oranges Diana had chosen looked stunning against the neutral tones of the venue. Instead of traditional centerpieces, Margaret had created flowing installations that cascaded down the tables like waterfalls of color. It was bold and beautiful, and nothing like the soft romantic aesthetic Diana had originally planned for her wedding. It was better. "You were right about these colors," Margaret said, stepping back to admire her work. "They're perfect. This whole event feels like a celebration of transformation, of strength. I'm honored to be part of it." Diana felt tears prick her eyes at the kindness in Margaret's voice. "Thank you for believing in this idea. I know it's unconventional." "The best things usually are," Margaret replied with a warm smile. The caterers arrived next, setting up stations in the kitchen and beginning preparations for the meal. Diana had kept the menu largely the same as what she had planned for the wedding: herb-crusted salmon and filet mignon with seasonal vegetables, but she had added a few touches that felt more celebratory and less formal. The cake, redesigned from wedding white to a stunning creation featuring autumn leaves made of spun sugar, stood on display near the entrance to the ballroom. Allison showed up 2 hours before guests were scheduled to arrive, carrying Diana's dress and makeup bag. "Okay, we're doing this. Let's get you ready to show the world what victory looks like." They set up in one of the estate's smaller rooms that had been designated as a bridal suite, though tonight it served a different purpose. Diana showered and let Allison help her with her hair, pulling it into an elegant updo that showed off her neck and shoulders. The makeup was more dramatic than Diana usually wore, with a smoky eye that made her green eyes striking and a deep red lip that matched the boldness of her dress. When Diana finally stepped into the emerald gown, she barely recognized herself in the mirror. The dress hugged her curves in all the right places, the color making her auburn hair look like fire. She looked powerful, confident, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with pleasing anyone else. This was her night, her celebration, her story. "You look incredible," Allison said softly. "Diana, I mean it. You look like a woman who knows exactly who she is." Diana turned from the mirror and hugged her best friend tightly. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. You kept me from falling apart. You fought for me when I didn't know how to fight for myself." "That's what best friends are for," Allison said, returning the embrace. "Now, let's go show everyone that Diana Winters is absolutely thriving." Guests began arriving at 6 o'clock, right on schedule. Diana stood near the entrance to greet them, her heart pounding with nervous energy. What if this was a mistake? What if people thought she was pathetic, trying too hard to prove she was okay? What if they whispered about her behind her back, pitying the woman who had been so publicly humiliated that she had to throw herself a consolation party? But those fears evaporated the moment her parents walked through the door. Her mother took one look at Diana in the emerald dress and started crying. Her father pulled her into a tight hug and whispered, "You are the strongest person I know. We are so proud of you." Rebecca arrived next, along with friends from college who had driven hours to be there. They hugged Diana and told her the venue was stunning, that she looked amazing, that they were honored to celebrate with her. Colleagues from work showed up with bottles of champagne. Old neighbors she hadn't seen in years appeared with cards and well wishes. One by one, 42 people filed into the historic Hartwell estate, and every single one of them had come to support Diana, to celebrate with her, to prove that she was loved and valued and not alone. The cocktail hour was lively and warm. People mingled in the garden area, sipping drinks and admiring the flowers. Diana moved through the crowd, accepting compliments and hugs, feeling the tightness in her chest begin to ease. This was working. People were happy to be here. They weren't judging her or pitying her. They were celebrating with her. As the sun began to set, Guests moved into the ballroom for dinner. The jazz quartet began playing, their music filling the space with energy and life. Diana sat at a table with Allison, Rebecca, and her parents, looking around at the transformed wedding reception. Every seat was filled. Every face was smiling. The room glowed with candlelight and laughter and the unmistakable warmth of people who genuinely cared about each other. Dinner was served, and the food was exceptional. The salmon melted on Diana's tongue, and the vegetables were perfectly seasoned. Between courses, people came up to her table to toast her, to share stories, to remind her of her own strength. Her boss gave an impromptu speech about what a valuable member of the team she was. A college friend told a funny story about Diana organizing a campus charity event with military precision. Allison raised her glass and said simply, "To Diana, the bravest person I know." After dinner, as dessert was being served, Diana stood up. The room gradually quieted as people noticed her rising. She had prepared a short speech, had practiced it dozens of times in her apartment. But now, standing in front of everyone who had shown up for her, the words she had planned felt inadequate. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," Diana began, her voice steady despite the emotion building in her throat. 12 weeks ago, my life changed in a very public and painful way. I won't pretend it wasn't difficult. There were days when I didn't want to get out of bed, when I questioned everything about myself, when I felt like I would never recover from what happened. The room was completely silent now, everyone listening intently. But then something shifted. Diana continued, "I realized that I had a choice. I could let that moment define me, could let someone else's cruelty determine my worth and my future, or I could choose to write my own story. I could choose to celebrate the life I have, the people who love me, and the future that's still waiting for me." She looked around the room at the faces watching her, her parents wiping away tears, Rebecca beaming with pride, Allison nodding encouragement, friends and colleagues who had taken time out of their lives to be here for her. "This party was supposed to be a wedding," Diana said. "I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I had planned to stand in this venue and promise my life to someone I thought I knew, someone I thought loved me. But it turns out that wasn't the right story. This is the right story. Being surrounded by all of you, by people who have supported me and believed in me and shown up for me when it mattered most. That's real love. That's what's worth celebrating." Diana raised her glass, and everyone in the room did the same. So, here's to new beginnings. Here's to choosing yourself. Here's to the family we're born into and the family we choose. Here's to surviving the worst and coming out stronger. Thank you for being part of my story. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for reminding me that I'm not alone. "To Diana!" someone shouted, and the room erupted in a chorus of voices echoing the sentiment. Glasses clinked, people cheered, and Diana felt something break open in her chest. Something that had been locked tight since that morning at Bellamy's. It was relief and joy and gratitude all mixed together, overwhelming and wonderful. The jazz quartet launched into an upbeat number, and people began moving to the dance floor. Diana's father took her hand and led her out for the first dance, and she rested her head on his shoulder, the way she had when she was a little girl learning to waltz in their living room. "You did good, sweetheart," her father said quietly. "You took something terrible and made it beautiful. That takes real courage." "I learned it from you and Mom," Diana said. "You always taught us that what matters isn't what happens to you. It's how you respond to it." "We taught you well," her father said with a smile. The party continued for hours. Diana danced with Rebecca, with Allison, with college friends and work colleagues. She laughed until her sides hurt at jokes and stories. She ate cake and drank champagne and felt genuinely, completely happy in a way she hadn't felt in months. This was what freedom felt like. This was what choosing yourself looked like. It was messy and imperfect, and absolutely perfect all at once. Around 9:30, as Diana was catching her breath near the dessert table, there was a commotion at the entrance to the ballroom. She looked up and felt her heart drop into her stomach. William Taylor was standing in the doorway. He was wearing a suit, expensive and perfectly tailored. His hair was styled, his expression a mixture of anger and disbelief as he took in the scene before him. Behind him, security guards from the venue were approaching quickly. But William had already pushed past the initial checkpoint. The music didn't stop, but people nearby had noticed. Conversations quieted. Heads turned. Diana felt Allison materialize at her side immediately. A protective presence. "What is he doing here?" Allison hissed. William's eyes found Diana across the room. He started walking toward her, his face flushed. "Diana, we need to talk. This is ridiculous. You can't just—" "Sir, you need to leave immediately." A security guard had caught up to him, placing a firm hand on William's arm. "You're not on the guest list. This is a private event." "I paid for half of this." William's voice was rising now, drawing more attention. "This was supposed to be my wedding. She doesn't get to just take everything and throw some pathetic party." "Actually," Diana said, her voice cutting through his tirade with surprising calm, "I do get to do exactly that. The venue is paid for. The vendors are paid for. I'm using services that would have gone to waste otherwise. You have no legal right to be here, and you need to leave." William stared at her, and Diana saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, that she was standing up to him so directly. Or maybe it was seeing her in that emerald dress, surrounded by people who obviously cared about her, looking nothing like the broken woman he had expected her to become. "This is insane," William said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "You're making a fool of yourself, Diana. Everyone knows what you're doing. You're trying to prove you're okay when everyone can see you're not. It's sad." What's sad?" Allison interjected, stepping forward. "Is that you can't let her move on. What's sad is that you're so threatened by her happiness that you had to crash her party. What's sad is that you're here instead of with your girlfriend, which makes me wonder if your new relationship isn't quite as perfect as you've been posting on social media." William's face reddened. "This has nothing to do with Lori, doesn't it?" Diana said quietly. She pulled out her phone, and her hands were steady as she opened the folder of screenshots she had saved months ago. "Because I have evidence that says otherwise. I have your script for how you plan to humiliate me at Bellamy's. I have months of messages between you and Lori planning your relationship while you were still engaged to me. I have documentation of everything, William. I've had it this whole time." The color drained from William's face. Around them, guests had formed a semicircle, watching the confrontation unfold. Diana could see phones out, recording, the same way phones had recorded her humiliation at Bellamy's. But this time, she was the one in control. "I didn't use this information," Diana continued, her voice growing stronger. "I didn't post it online or send it to your employer or share it with everyone who attended your little performance at the restaurant. Do you know why? Because I didn't need to. I didn't need revenge or vindication or to destroy your reputation the way you tried to destroy mine. I just needed to move forward with my life. I needed to surround myself with people who actually love me and celebrate the fact that I escaped a relationship with someone who would plan my humiliation like it was a business strategy." William looked like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. The security guards had firm grips on both his arms now. "But if you ever try to interfere with my life again," Diana said, and there was steel in her voice that surprised even her. "If you ever contact me or harass me or try to stop me from living my life, I will share every single screenshot I have. Your employer will see them. Lori will see them. Everyone who watched that video from Bellamy's will see exactly what kind of person you really are. Do you understand?" William nodded slowly, the fight draining out of him. He suddenly looked small and pathetic standing there in his expensive suit, exposed in front of dozens of witnesses. "Get him out of here," Diana said to the security guards. They didn't need to be told twice. They escorted William out of the ballroom, his protests fading as they moved him toward the exit. The moment he was gone, the room erupted in applause. People were cheering, clapping, surrounding Diana with support and admiration. Someone started chanting, "Diana! Diana!" and others joined in. Allison grabbed her hand and squeezed it tight. "That was amazing," Allison said, her eyes shining. "You were perfect. You didn't sink to his level, but you made it absolutely clear that you're not someone to be messed with." Diana felt adrenaline coursing through her veins, her heart pounding. "Did that really just happen?" "It really just happened," Rebecca said, appearing at her other side. "And it was the most badass thing I've ever seen my sister do." The jazz quartet, bless them, had kept playing through the entire confrontation. Now they launched into a particularly upbeat number, and people began returning to the dance floor, the energy in the room somehow even higher than before. Diana stood in the center of it all, feeling something settle into place inside her. She had faced William one more time, and she had won. Not by destroying him, but by refusing to let him destroy her. The rest of the party passed in a blur of dancing and laughter and joy. People kept coming up to Diana to tell her how proud they were of her, how inspiring she was, how much they admired her strength. Her mother hugged her tightly and said, "You are your father's daughter. You stand your ground, and you don't back down from what's right." Cease. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, each person stopped to thank Diana for including them in the celebration. "This was the best party I've been to in years," one colleague said. "Not in spite of the circumstances, but because of them. You turned something painful into something powerful." By 11 o'clock, only a handful of people remained. The quartet was packing up their instruments, the caterers were cleaning the kitchen, and Diana stood in the ballroom looking at the remnants of her freedom party. Flowers still brightened the tables, candles still flickered in their holders. The cake, mostly eaten, still displayed its beautiful autumn leaves. Allison came to stand beside her. "How are you feeling?" Diana thought about the question. How was she feeling? Exhausted, certainly. Emotionally wrung out from the confrontation with William, but underneath all of that, she felt something else. Peace, closure, pride. "I feel free," Diana said finally. "For the first time since the restaurant, I feel genuinely free. Like I'm not carrying his betrayal around anymore. Like I can actually move forward." "You can," Allison said. "You already have. Look at what you did tonight. You took the worst day of your life and you transformed it into one of the best. You brought together everyone who loves you, and you celebrated yourself. That's not just surviving, Diana. That's thriving." Diana turned to her best friend. "Thank you for believing this was possible when I wasn't sure myself." "Always," Allison said, linking her arm through Diana's. "That's what family does." Rebecca and Diana's parents joined them in the ballroom. Her father looked around at the beautiful space and smiled. "I think this worked out exactly the way it was supposed to. You were meant to be here tonight, sweetheart, just not in the way you originally planned." Diana thought about that as she said goodbye to the last few guests and helped the venue staff with final cleanup. This venue, these flowers, this celebration, it had all been planned for a wedding that would have been a mistake. William had never truly loved her. He had loved the idea of her, the way she fit into his life, the image they projected together. But he hadn't loved her enough to be honest, to be faithful, to treat her with basic respect. And now, standing in the historic Hartwell estate, in her emerald dress with her real family and friends around her, Diana understood something important. She hadn't lost anything worth keeping. She had escaped something that would have slowly eroded her sense of self until she didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. William had done her a favor, as brutal as his method had been. He had freed her to discover who she was without him. And it turned out she was someone pretty incredible. The drive home was quiet. Rebecca had decided to stay with Diana for a few more days, and they rode together in comfortable silence. When they got back to the apartment, Diana carefully hung up her emerald dress and washed off her makeup. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and saw someone different from the woman who had sat in this same bathroom 12 weeks ago, crying so hard she couldn't breathe. She saw someone who had survived, someone who had chosen to stand up rather than stay down, someone who had transformed pain into power and heartbreak into celebration. She saw Diana Winters exactly as she was meant to be. Diana climbed into bed that night with a sense of completion. The wedding that never happened had become something better, something more authentic, something entirely hers. Tomorrow she would wake up and continue building her life, making decisions based on what she wanted rather than what someone else expected. She would take on new clients, strengthen old friendships, maybe eventually open herself to the possibility of love again, though that felt far away right now. But tonight, she simply rested in the knowledge that she had done something difficult and emerged victorious. She had written her own ending to a story someone else had tried to control, and it was a good ending, one filled with love and laughter and the unshakable certainty that she could handle whatever came next. As Diana drifted off to sleep, her last thought was simple but profound. She had been right to walk out of Bellamy's with her head high. She had been right to refuse to give William the satisfaction of her breakdown. She had been right to transform devastation into celebration. She had been right to choose herself. And in the morning, when she woke up to sunshine streaming through her windows and her sister making coffee in the kitchen, Diana Winters smiled, because she was free. Really, truly free. And that was worth everything. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.